No Miki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The No Miki Show.
Well, hello. It is TNS Live, Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. You know it. We do this. We have on some of our favorite people to have really long, deep conversations about, the really big issues that we're facing right now, like fascism. That's today's topic. Nice small topic. We are talking about the right wing, the far right, how they've been organizing in this country in particular for years, but really it's been happening globally, what their next moves are, what their messaging is. There's a lot on the agenda right now. And of course, everything that's been going on Capitol Hill in terms of, holding the people accountable who stormed Capitol Hill to go murder Mike Pence and steal documents and, put everybody at risk. That's an important thing. And turns out there's some texts that have been released this week that, of all people, Liz Cheney has been able to talk about them publicly in the last couple of days. We are here with David Doel. You know David Doel. He's the best. He's our favorite. We have two Davids on our show today wearing the same exact outfit, but I'm going to say David Doel's looks better because he's got the green background. It's very Christmassy. Of course,
that's right.
Rational National. The national would be Canada. So
that's correct. It's good to be here.
Nice to be here. I gotta start off because I feel like today is a very good day to talk about the crazy right. I'm in Florida. I'm in southern Florida for 2 whole days, 3 days, something like that. And there's a lot of crazy here. Like we talk about it, but then when you see it in your face and you're like, oh yeah, yes, this is a special type of crazy. So why not lean in and let's talk about it. How are you feeling in terms of state of fascist affairs?
Well, yeah, it's funny. This is one topic I rarely cover because it's super depressing to me. It appears there is very little going on to actually deal with it. Mm-hmm. So, I cover enough, most news is already negative enough, but when it gets to this kind of thing, it's a massive downer because I don't know what we can do. Honestly, I don't know what we can do to actually get people in power to take this seriously. I mean, we'll get to the story here, but in Canada, we actually did do something at the beginning of this year when it comes to the Proud Boys. But in terms of imagining what U.S. politicians can do to deal with this, they're so afraid of actually going after the right that they're leaving so much on the table and essentially are going to hand the keys over to them.
Yeah.
And they're in power right now. I mean, they have full power. They can do something, but they're doing, it appears to be nothing.
So wait, what did you guys do in Canada with the Proud Boys?
So at the beginning of February of this year, Canada added the Proud Boys to the list of terrorist organizations, which essentially means it criminalizes people from training or recruiting for the organization. It also criminalizes anyone that deals with property or finances when it comes to the Proud Boys. So it essentially killed the Proud Boys in Canada. I mean, they're not operating here anymore. So, taking a step as simple as that mm-hmm. may, benefit Americans to think about that. Now, the worry there, when Canada did that, there was still a worry from the left that, when we add a group like the Proud Boys to the terrorist list, then there's this assumption that it may mean that the left's going to be hit by something that is, ridiculous, like criminalizing, BLM, for example. But that hasn't happened. So, I think 2 years ago, back in 2019, is the first time that Canada actually added neo-Nazi groups to the terrorist list. And then the Proud Boys were added this year. So since that's happened, there hasn't really been this encroachment on freedoms when it comes to, legitimate left activism. So while that may, an action like that may be a worry in the U.S. because of how politics is done there, it's not really a worry here. And so far, it appears to have killed the Proud Boys in Canada. So I, perfectly happy with that decision.
Well, I mean, we do have some different types of laws uniquely to the states in terms of free speech. It does not mean that all speech is free. I like to reiterate that over and over again. It's how, Glenn Greenwald has, of course, like carved out a space for himself in terms of being a free speech absolutist and, working as an attorney to defend people that, I think that like you only have so much time on this planet and you have a platform, like why would you choose to defend some of these people? But, that is kind of a mark. And then simultaneously, this argument that you mentioned about how the left is always worried it's going to come back at them because of, the true and horrible history of intelligence and of course, every type of organization within the government that has been tasked with taking on anything from law enforcement to more investigative kind of work. For the most part, it's been pretty bad. However, I can't really. You never know, but at least under the current government, I can't really see them going after the way that they went after so many different groups in the 60s and literally murdered people. It's definitely something that has happened, but I think the new way that they do that, and don't forget, those were very, very right-wing people that were in the FBI and of course the CIA, very right-wing. They're the same people now that are the same. Literally, some of them are the actual same people, and some of them were trained by those people, whether it's Roger Stone and those folks, or the old families that were part of the intelligence industries because they're tied into like monopolies, like folks that just extracted from the global south. With that being said, their new form of doing it is just like join the police department and have basically a protection unit around you so that you're never held accountable for doing really horrible things.
Yes,
it's not gonna come up the same way that it used to.
Yeah. First, just to be clear, the actual, there's still freedom of speech here. So, you can still say horrible things. That's fine. It's the act of actually joining the Proud Boys as an organization and the functioning of that organization that was criminalized. But yeah, this gets to the issue with fascism in the US. I mean, the police force are a major part of that, right? So, unless you deal with that, which I would say maybe you could say is sort of the epicenter of all of this, then unless you deal with that, you're not going to deal with the actual issue of fascism and white supremacy in America. You have to really deal with the police first, and then it kind of trickles down from there. And I mean, Biden talked about increasing funding into the police. So like we're not even in the realm of a discussion about actually tackling this problem seriously. So again, this gets back to me being super depressed about this issue because honestly, I don't know what it will take. I mean, you saw the insurrection. What more needs to happen? Like you're opening the door for them to do this again and actually be successful next time if you don't do anything now.
And if you don't do things, they're going to keep growing. I mean, this is the part that I get really frustrated with the Democrats the Democrats in power, the establishment, is that they're so concerned about winning elections, which great track record there. Look, that's a whole thing. But I am of the belief, and I'm going to be honest with you. I've been talking to a lot of people who are in like centrist Democratic circles lately who've reached out and said, like, I've had enough. Like, I don't, when they're starting to turn, when the big billionaires are like, we're not giving money to the Democrats anymore because you're not focusing on voting, rights, like basic fundamental things that make them, when they go to their dinner parties with the other billionaires, they're like, well, that guy's a racist, but at least I believe in voting rights. And like, that's what they differentiate themselves on. They're like, I'm a Democrat who's rich, but I believe in some very fundamental values. But the Democrats in power, they claim that they're really concerned about Republicans and that progressives are only concerned about taking on, bad Democrats. But the truth is, it's just the exact, they're just doing nothing. Everybody else is like covering all the fronts, calling them out for not doing anything against the right wing and also challenging them and taking on the right wing. But if you don't do anything, they grow. And New York Times today, this just horrifies me, but not a surprise if folks travel around the country or world. You can see it out in the open. Proud Boys in the US is now organizing all the way down to the school board level. I mean, this is listen, they could just say tomorrow that they're not the Proud Boys, that they're just whatever this is. And even if they were put on a terrorist watch list of some sort, they could just rebrand and be protected again. I mean, the Bugaloo Boys, the Proud Boys, I can't keep them track. They're all some version of the same element. They just like watch different brands of shows on YouTube, I guess. But I mean, they're out there in the open and they're organizing in the open. And I feel like we're still talking about them like there's some sort of, little threat that didn't really turn into anything. And I worry that the establishment is dealing with terrorism in our country, in the US at least, the way that Obama kind of ignored ISIS and said it was just some group that you shouldn't pay attention to, 13 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be, you could say the Democrats were at least solid on, some cultural issues like racism, but you can't even really say that anymore. As you said, they really are not doing anything. I mean, what really have they done? I mean, in terms of Biden so far, I could point to him pulling out of Afghanistan. That was great. Okay. But, there's not much that's actually been done. And this is, again, not to get ahead of ourselves here, but obviously midterms are going to be an issue. If they actually cared about winning,
yeah,
voting rights, I think, would be just the base level of what you should be doing. But this shows that they aren't just, a lot of people say, oh, Democratic politicians, they know they're corrupt, they know they're terrible. I don't think a lot of them do. I really don't, because voting rights, you would think that's like the first thing you go to as a Democratic politician. I understand the corrupt part when it comes to money, money in politics and the economic issues, but if you can't even get voting rights done properly, then you're just incompetent. Like, it's not that you are knowingly corrupt, you're just incompetent. So it gets, it gets to leadership. Of course, the Democratic leadership is the issue. There are members of the Democratic Party that actually want to, move forward on these issues, but they're stopped by leadership or certain members of the party that prevent any kind of progress. So ultimately, that's the problem here, that you have these incredibly old, and not just in terms of age, but old as in have been there forever, doing the same thing forever, doing nothing forever. These old people in power that need to get out of power. I mean, Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, they have all been there forever, and they really have no idea what is going on in terms of the moment that we are in right now and what is necessary to get out of it.
Well, I mean, it's crazy to me because, like, how much more jarring could it get than having somebody storm into your office, steal your laptop, put their feet up on your desk, and go through all of your, paperwork, who knows what was in there, Nancy Pelosi. And if that didn't scare her, or if when Bill de Blasio his daughter was doxxed by the union leader of the NYPD, if that didn't scare him, I'm starting to think like they're so afraid of losing their personal power. So if you're going to speak from the perspective, I think we just lost David. Oh, he's back. If we're going to speak of the perspective of just personal power, forget about everything else, change, whether or not they're in touch with what's happening on the ground, whether or not they have any empathy, because you'd think after they came after you, at least you'd have to be selfish in a sense to go after them. But protection, you'd think that they want to keep their power. You think that Chuck Schumer wants to keep the Senate because he's in control right now, and so he's important. Or you think Nancy Pelosi wants to keep the House because she's in control, she gets to decide what makes it to the table, who gets to sit on which, committees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But clearly there's a disconnect because everybody, even the most out-of-touch Democrat, knows that we're very likely not to have the House, the Senate, and possibly the presidency. And then what? Like in 2 years, then what? They're laying the groundwork right now so that even though the Republicans don't have the generational numbers and the demographics, they know exactly with precision what numbers they need to get in which districts as we're in a redistricting year. They're redistricting for the next 20, 30 years. They've got the courts for the next 20, 30 years. And now they've got a pipeline of literal fascists and Nazi boys, from the school boards all the way up. What on earth kind of hellscape are we entering in 2 years? I don't think people are psychologically prepared. You think this is bad? It's going to be, I'm in Florida right now, and I'm like, every time I come here, I'm like, what is this place? This is not the Florida I used to go to when I was a kid to go for vacation to visit my grandparents. It's like people running around in Proud Boys shirts and like yelling at, it's insane.
Yeah, and once they take power again, once the GOP takes power, they're not going to give it up. That's the thing with this insurrection. It was a test run for the future. If they're able to successfully win the next, the midterms, of course, they're done. But if they're able to win the presidency in 2024, they're not going to give it up. As you said, the organizing that is going on, the people that are involved, these are fascists. Their supporters are fascists. That is just a fact at this point. And you have leadership, Democratic leadership, not coming to terms with that, or if they are, they're too afraid to maybe go after Sinema and Manchin in a way that would actually force their hand on some of these issues, because ultimately I don't know where the blame lies here, because obviously leadership is to blame, Sinema and Manchin are to blame, but there's a lot that they could be doing in terms of their power in their position to force the hand of Manchin and Sinema to come on board with some of these issues, and they aren't doing it. They don't really seem to care enough, or they don't really seem to understand how important it is to actually get it done now, because once the midterms come, that's it. I mean, it's over.
And, they talk about Russia all the time. Like, okay, great. Well, then you should listen to Putin last week when Putin came to the U.S. and did a press conference. And Putin stood up and when Putin was asked about how he jails his, he goes after his enemies. Literally, many have been killed, journalists, actual political opponents that he's tried to kill, and some that have disappeared. A reporter directly asked that to his face, an American reporter, the only one he would let ask the question. And she went in, and then he pivoted and said, "Oh, what about how you're handling BLM, and how are you handling you had your own problems in America?" And I'm sitting here thinking, he just handed you an opportunity to link all of the right wing to him. I mean, and they don't even use these moments to say to kill three birds with one stone, to get their actual agenda out along with going after the right wing. And like, if they don't want to take responsibility for all this stuff, they could at least pivot and say, well, tech companies really need to crack down on, the bots, the far right, folks that are organizing online, that some are getting boosted by foreign governments, which, how many freaking reports do we have to have come out about this? And they still miss those opportunities. There's so many pathways. So I want to pivot really quick. We're going to touch on it for a second, and then we're going to shift over to Rockfin. But, weird person of the week that I find myself saying yay to is Liz Cheney.
I don't want to give her any credit. I mean, I understand what you're saying, because this is the issue when there are so many horrible people. Somebody just acknowledging reality all of a sudden seems like a guiding light. Like that's the state that we are in right now, where Liz Cheney is someone that sounds reasonable because she's just acknowledging reality. But yeah,
they always say, like, excuse me. They always say, like, the left is just like the far right. I'm like, no, I actually think the left is more like the centrists who no longer have power in the Republican Party or are losing it to a force that's just like taking them on a downward spiral. I feel like that is how we feel, and now a lot of normie Democrats too, about the incompetent Democrats who are just sitting there and being like, oh, an insurrection, okay, no big deal, moving on, next.
Yeah, I mean, one of the upsides is that this is actually in many ways radicalized Democratic voters to realize how horrible the party is, the leadership is, to understand, hey, you know what, that Bernie wing actually has some good points. That AOC, that Rashida Tlaib, they're actually making some good points here, and it helps to open up at least the voters to a maybe a different perspective. But if it comes too late, it's not really going to help all that much. But still, it's. We're in this scenario now where there appears to be very little hope. But if we can have strength in numbers and grow this movement and grow the knowledge that we are finally understanding what is going on in terms of the fascism, in terms of economic issues, in terms of everything going on, if we're able to grow support for our side, that ultimately will benefit us. But how it comes up into actual power in changing things, I think, remains to be seen.
That's that old line, when someone's dying, they call and they're an atheist, and they call over their priest. I feel like that's what a lot of these Democrats are doing right now. Like climate change is out of control. And they're like, oh, by the way, Bernie sounds great right now. I want to play this clip, and then right after this clip, just for everybody while you're watching, we're going to move over fully to rockfin.com/Nomihi. I want to get David's reaction to this clip from Liz Cheney, and then we're gonna do a deep dive into how the far right is really just taking over the world, and we're kind of like half asleep for it. So let's see the prophet Liz Cheney.
Trump administration officials urged immediate action by the president. Quote, POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed. In another, Mark, he needs to stop this now. A third, in all caps, tell them to go home. A fourth, and I quote, POTUS needs to calm this shit down. Indeed, according to the records, multiple Fox News hosts knew the president needed to act immediately. They texted Mr. Meadows, and he has turned over those texts. Quote, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy, Laura Ingraham wrote. Please get him on TV. Destroying everything you have accomplished, Brian Kilmeade texted. Quote, can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol, Sean Hannity urged. As the violence continued, one of the president's sons texted Mr. Meadows, quote, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough, Donald Trump Jr. texted. Meadows responded, quote, I'm pushing it hard. I agree. Still, President Trump did not immediately act. Donald Trump Jr. texted again and again, urging action by the president. Quote, we need an Oval Office address. He has to lead now. It has gone too far and gotten out of hand, end quote.
Whoop. All right. I don't know if this is, if we're still live here. All right. We're going to move over to rockfin.com/Nomiki to continue our conversation with David Doel. We're going to talk about the legacy of Trumpism and the insurrections and Koch brothers, all the same flavor, and how that's, what that's going to manifest into in the next, the final years of this world. So that's what I'm looking at, the final years. We'll see you over at rockfin.com/Nomiki.